Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the finale of the 10-day challenge. So you've done it. You've been through the 10 days. So this is the important part because we're going to give you some information tonight. And I'm just kind of passionate about this information, as you know. We're going to talk about longevity. We'll recap a little bit on the low carb eating, and we'll also recap on some intermittent fasting. But I want you to understand the premise of why I do this. All my audience, as I can see, are not spring chickens. So we all are in that position in our life. We want to do what we can do to make our life awesome. And for me, I see patients, turning 55 and 60, and their health is they make it this far, but then they spend the next 20 years in chronic disease. So we want to prevent that. We want to live long, healthy life, and I'm going to give you some ways to do that. So you're a survivor. You did it. It wasn't that hard. It was only for 10 days. It's just preparing you for the 21 days in January. So tonight we're going to talk about longevity and the impact of nutrition and genetics. So I teach a lot, and I teach doctors about this a lot because they need to teach their patients this as well. And I think it's important that if I know this information, you should know this information, because I want us all to live long and prosper, like live long and prosper, because everybody wants to live a long life, but nobody actually wants to get old. So there's some keys for longevity. So it's good genes, it's good gut bacteria, good mitochondria, moderate exercise, calorie restriction, the ketogenic diet, that's what we talked about on Monday night, and some intermittent fasting. And these are all things that we can incorporate in our lives. You may be doing some of them now, but adding a few of them in will help to create a better forecast for you in the longevity scope. So what is longevity? It's the period of time an organism is expected to live under ideal circumstances. So we want to create your circumstances as ideal as possible. And to me, it's always fascinating that, in the United States, we spend the most money on healthcare, but we have the lowest life expectancy in all the developed nations. We're 31st in all the nations in the world. Our life expectancy is 79 years. So how long can we potentially live? Well, in France, Jeanne Calmet, she lived to be 122 years old. So that's quite a long life, but we want to be able to be in those years and live longer, but we want to be able to do stuff. We don't want to sit in a wheelchair and drool on ourselves. So the oldest living woman is crowned by the Guinness Book of World Records, is 116 years old, Kane Tanaka. She wakes up every morning at 6 in the morning. She studies math and has a lot of other fun subjects, and she competes fiercely in the board game of Othello. So what did our ancestors get right? They grew their own food. They cooked with whole foods. They rarely snacked. They engaged in physical labor. They went to bed early. They got up early, had a traditional diet, led a simple life, and did not have electronics. So, and it's so interesting when I kind of look at my life so far, it's like we've got a whole spectrum where we've been the processed foods and all those things, and now we are to the point where we're getting back to, whole foods, get up early, go to bed early, be active, and simplify our lives. So what causes aging? Well, there's some factors that cause aging. We have a telomere shortening, and those are the chromosomes. They have little caps on the end of them, and they lose their the chromosomes lose their telomeres over a period of time. We have chronological aging. That's risk factors increase over time. So the older we get, the more likely we are to have things happen to us as far as chronic disease. Oxidative stress is another cause of aging. The oxidants damage the DNA, and that damages the proteins and the lipids in our body. And glycation, that's how glucose sugar binds to, and then it inhibits DNA on those protein and lipids. So there's a big, we hear all this anti-aging versus healthy aging. Well, for me, I prefer healthy aging because, we're not going to stay at that same age. And I see people who are desperately trying to preserve their age, and it doesn't look good. But I think, all the wrinkles and the gray hair we get are, it's our wisdom showing through. So we have a tendency to name all our stages of life, the terrible twos, growing pains, the quarter life crisis, dirty 30s, the middle age, and over the hill. So we have factors that affect our aging, and that would be what we call genetics and epigenetics. You're not your mom's genes or your dad's genes. So what is a healthy lifestyle in this 21st century? So there are 5 particular areas that have been studied to show that there's a large impact on premature death. So diet is number 1, exercise, body weight, smoking, and alcohol. And here's what that looks like. So these are the factors that influence human aging and longevity. So we have genetic factors. Those are the intrinsic factors. That's what we're born with. Then we have epigenetic factors. That's a combination of what we're born with and the external effects of those that are coming into our body that affect our current genes. And then diet and lifestyle. We know that is changeable. Environment in Florida, we're really lucky that we don't have the big smokestacks. They are around, but in our area, we don't really have that. And we've got pretty clean air comparatively, maybe a little mold, mildew, and some humidity. But other than that, so you kind of have a choice on where you live. If you take that. So when we look at those 5 factors, we look at physical activity. We need to do a minimum of 3.5 hours a week. That's 30 minutes a day, only 30 minutes a day. Think how long you sit in front of the TV. Think how long you sit at your desk, how long you sleep at night, and just to give just 30 minutes to make your body move a little bit harder than it normally does. No smoking. I mean, that's a no-brainer. If you're smoking, just stop. I mean, it's just not doing you any good. Alternative healthy eating index, that's like the top 40% of all these factors that make the biggest difference. The body mass index would definitely relate to those alternative healthy eatings, foods. If you haven't been to the office and you haven't had your body fat or BMI tested, you're welcome to do that. We've got the InBody at the office. If you're on this video, then you can call the office and come in and get it done. The InBody is a massive look inside of your body, of your bone structure and your muscles and your fat and your visceral fat, and it gives you a starting point. So if you're not sure where you are, you can't go where you want to be unless you know where you are. So come in and get that done in the Eustis office. So you want your body mass index or your BMI at between 18 and 24. Anything over 24.9 is considered obese. Anything over 30 is considered, anything over 25 is considered overweight. Anything over 30 is considered obese. And when we are measuring patients, it's pretty shocking. Patients are shocked when you tell them, okay, your BMI is 32. That puts you in the obese category. And they're like, well, I'm not obese. Well, yes, you are. Maybe we just look in a mirror from here up and we don't see the rest of it, or we don't want to see it. We just keep getting bigger clothes and hiding the fact of that. And moderate drinking. I'll let you have a glass of wine. It's going to be a better choice than hard alcohol or beer. But, you can have, I'm not talking about the 12-ounce pour. I'm talking about, 4 to 6 ounce pour and one a day. One glass of wine has resveratrol in it. It's great for you. The second glass of wine totally negates that first wine. So sip it, enjoy it, and, be mindful of it. So we have a life expectancy at age 50, and those 5 risk factors, if you have all 5 of them, if you are in the good part of all 5 of those, that's going to add almost 40 years to your life. So for women, if you have all 5, you can live to 93 in a healthy way. If you're male, I'm sorry, but it's only 87.6. But women, we're kind of catching up with that mortality thing there because we're having stressful jobs and we're doing more things trying to fit everything in a day, and that's stressful on the body, and that also will increase our risk of cardiovascular disease and things like that. So let's talk about some genes. Now we do have some ways to test the body, and there's a huge bridging gap between the mind and the body. So when we test the DNA, so when we look at the domain, we're looking at the mind and body part there, but what we look at is look at all the genes and look how all they crisscross. That from cognition, it goes all the way down to the same genes that affect your sleep or your gastrointestinal system or your inflammatory markers or your heart or your stress. And, they all kind of overlap in a certain way. So we can do testing to find these things out. And when we look at it, this is a little different picture to look at it. It just shows you how integrated these systems are and how we respond to our environment. So all these just crisscross all over. It makes like almost a Mandela, look there. But it's an amazing. We have more network. I always say we have more wiring than the space shuttle, but we drive our bodies around like garbage trucks. We put crappy food in them. We don't care what we do to them. We don't take care of them. Then we get mad when they break down on us. So There are a couple things, and when we talk about aging, there's something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is what really is our working memory, our stress response, kind of keeps us from being depressed. And it's really activated by physical activity. And that helps to improve cognition and promotes neuroplasticity. And that's because the BDNF is enhanced. Omega-3 fatty acids, those are your fish oils. And if you're not eating fish every day, you're taking fish oil. And those are really important. That also improves your cognition, enhances your BDNF. Avoid diets high in saturated fats and refined sugars. So we're going to talk a little bit more about diet as we go. And sodium butyrate, we're looking at that as far as, supporting also the BDNF. So magnesium. Magnesium also improves the duration quality of sleep, and sleep is also helpful in improving that BDNF in our bodies. So we have inflammation factors that we have to think about as well. Interleukin 6, I'm not going to go into big detail about all this stuff, but when the interleukin 6 is depressed, it's associated with reduced risk of periodontitis, the major source of systemic inflammation. So we talk about, flossing our teeth, and who knew that flossing our teeth would decrease inflammation and improve our brain? So I'll hook on a couple of things at the end of that when I send the video out about like the water pick we use and why we use certain toothpaste and things like that. Just FYI. I always like people always ask me questions. Well, what do you do? So I've done a lot of research over the period of time. So I'll share that with you. So the IL-6 and the CRP are inflammation markers of what we call systemic inflammation. Now CRP, when you're coming in for a nutrition evaluation or workup with me, we always check CRP, and that means C-reactive protein. And it's released in response to inflammation and can be triggered by IL-6 as interleukin 6 too, which is like kind of a mediator for the for inflammation. But C-reactive protein, we look at that for risk of stroke, risk of heart attack, and just overall maybe autoimmune or just systemic inflammation. So it's a good marker to look at. And we will look at like lipid metabolism and cardiovascular disease. We have cholesterol, and cholesterol's not a bad thing. I mean, we all have it. We're born with it. It does good things to it. But when our diets are not effective and we're eating too much sugar, the lipid level, the low density lipid level has to rise to meet that need. So we have your HDL, your high density lipoprotein. That's the good guy. That's like the WD-40 of your arteries. Then we have the LDL, which is the low density lipoprotein. It's a little bit heavy, so it kind of stays along the bottom. But then we have the VLDL. That's the very low density lipoproteins, and that's the sticky stuff. That's the really dangerous stuff. So when I'm looking at blood work, I'm getting a complete panel that includes that VLDL. Most of your panels that you get from your regular checkup does not include that. But they'll be concerned about your LDL and automatically give you a statin when they didn't even look at your VLDL. So the VLDL is so sticky that's what makes kind of clogs the pipes and that narrows the parameters of the arteries so that the blood can't get through. And then also makes the arteries hard, stiffens them, and those pieces of plaque that build up break off. And if it goes to your heart, you have a heart attack. If it goes to your brain, you have a stroke. Neither one of which we want to do. So, the statins are not the answer. It's changing the diet. I can't tell you how many patients are given a statin, and nowadays, really, unless you've had some type of heart event, heart attack or anything like that, they're saying now, statin's not really what we need to do. We need to change the diet. So, APOE, the lipoprotein here also helps to aid in your lipid cholesterol transport and helps to clear out that cellular debris. And these are all from foods that we eat. DHA, this is part of the hexanoic acid, which is part of the omega-3 fatty acids. You have EPA and DHA. DHA helps to also help decrease Alzheimer's disease. So this is why we want to take fish oil. If you're over 50, I recommend cod liver oil because it's natural vitamin A found in it, natural vitamin D found in it, the liver from the cod, because I see those food logs and nobody's eating liver, and the omega-3s. Now, we eat a lot of fish in our household, but we don't eat it every day. So we do supplement with fish oil as well. And I use cod liver oil. But Standard Process has done some really brilliant things. They do specific Ulprima, which is high DHA. So it's a great, like, for cardiovascular and brain health. I use it for my females that are pregnant as almost like a to help the baby, because that'll help. That's when the brain is actually building, and that needs all this DHA. So it's great for brain health and cognition, decreases inflammation, keeps the triglycerides healthy and your HDL healthy, and improves cardiovascular function. So gut bacteria. Now, you've heard me talk about this, and I know I say it all the time, so I forget not everybody has heard it, but our large intestine is our immune system. 75% of our gut-assisted lymph tissue is in our large intestine. Also, 95% of our serotonin is made in our large intestine. Only 5% is made in our brain. So when you hear people say, well, I've got butterflies in my stomach, or I have a gut feeling, that's because we have a brain-gut connection. So, and you can see now with that 95% of serotonin how connected the brain is. So we want to make sure we build that good gut bacteria. And the genes that have the biggest bearing on your longevity are the ones inside a single cell of bacteria that live within and on and around your body. We have trillions of them. There's hundreds of different species, and they're all differentiated by their genes. So gut bacteria plays an amazing role in digestion and producing vitamins and producing minerals and hormones and proteins and nutrients. I mean, we're talking 100 trillion of these in our system, but we want the good guys, not the bad guys. So we have bacteria, the bad guys, which cause inflammation, and then we have bacteria that's the good guys that combats inflammation. And inflammation, as we know, leads to diseases of aging, which are Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia. So this has been studied beyond. So when we have an abundance of the bacteria that causes inflammation and a shortage of the one that combats inflammation, then we're noticing there's cognitive impairment in the elderly. And we're all getting there. There's nothing that we can do to stop it unless we die. But starving the bad bacteria is really helpful, and we can do that by avoiding certain things. Like the favorite thing it likes to chomp on is sugar. So the key to longevity is to feed the good bacteria and starve the bad bacteria. So common food sources with prebiotics to feed the good guys, like fibrous root vegetables, mushrooms, like kimchi and sauerkraut and things like that. We use ProSymbiotic by Standard Process in the office because it's a pre and probiotic. So I hear patients tell me, yeah, I'm taking a probiotic. That's awesome. But when you put the probiotic in, it's the good guys, and you're putting the good guys in. Well, if you don't feed them, they're going to die. So you have to keep putting them in. You're not really building your gut flora or your microbiome. So we do ProSymbiotic, so it feeds the guys. So with prebiotic inulin, so when you put the probiotic in, the good guys in, you're feeding them. So then they start to multiply and they build up a very good, healthy gut flora. So I prefer to do that. And then once you do that, you don't have to take it that often. But if you're taking a probiotic, you have to keep taking it all the time. So just kind of keep that in mind. So if you're taking a probiotic, that's awesome. But you need to take a prebiotic to feed that. So if you want to, once you're finished with your probiotic, come in and we'll get you, on the right pathway. So here are the top 10 foods to support longevity: green leafy vegetables, non-leafy cruciferous vegetables, berries, beans, mushrooms, onions. Mushrooms, now I'll get on my little soapbox. The mushrooms that you see like in the grocery store with the little dirt on it, the white little mushrooms, I prefer not to eat those because they're grown in chicken manure. And we get to smell that on a nice summer day down here when we drive back and forth to work, because they grow them in little low houses in chicken manure, and I prefer not to have that. But the mushrooms that are like shiitake and maitake and the crimini and the portobello, they're grown on wood. So those are the better ones for your immune system as well. So onions and seeds and nuts, tomatoes and pomegranates. Now you'll notice that there are not any animal products on there. So that has been my kind of shift of being more plant-based. That doesn't mean I'm completely vegan. I do have some animal sources, but they're all, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, wild-caught fish, free-range chicken and free-range eggs. So, but we don't do that all the time. We limit those things as well. These are the top 10 foods that destroy longevity. This is a no-brainer. sweetened dairy products, trans fat containing foods, and those are your foods that are down the aisles in the grocery store. We talk about shopping that outer ring of the grocery store. This is why. Donuts specifically, because they're just dough that's white flour that's dropped in a high boiling point of fat or oil, which is a trans fat, because real fats that are good for you have a very, very low boiling point. They get destroyed easily. So sausage, hot dog, lunch meats, any smoked or barbecued or conventionally raised meat. And I'm talking the beef that they feed genetically modified corn. Cows are designed to chew grass, not to be fed corn that's been genetically modified and sprayed with, glyphosate, because we are what they ate. In the Midwest, the Mars Candy Company gives the farmers all their stale and old candy wrappers and all and feeds it to the cattle. You are what they ate. Fried foods, high salted foods, and those are usually your processed foods. We eat a lot of whole foods in our household, so I salt freely, but we don't really eat anything that's processed that much, so I don't really have to watch my salt. Soda, any kind of soda, including diet soda, and your refined white flour and white sugar, which, like I said, these are all no-brainers. So let's do a little primer on premature aging. So aging, here's what happens. So when we age, it's caused by free radicals, and those unstable molecules that break down our cells the DNA is damaging the DNA. This creates a cellular chaos, and that creates oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is aging speeded up. So that's when the development of chronic diseases begin. So what can we do? Well, I research a lot and I have to teach doctors, so I have to go through oodles and oodles, and I do my little squirrel down the rabbit hole studying. There are 3 strategies of defense that are backed by science. So number 1 strategy is reduce your consumption of AGEs, advanced glycated end products. And so that if you cook meat at a high grill, that's what's going to cause that. Foods that are processed. So their highly inflammatory compounds are formed when you cook at high heat. It alters the fats and proteins in the foods, and it's found in animal-based fats and processed foods. Another reason why I'm kind of switching a little more plant-based. We knew this stuff then. I mean, before we could have done better, but we don't. So we're learning now. So these mix with glucose and fructose and cause really sticky molecules, and that causes the oxidative stress. Then that creates those signs of aging. We have the sagging skin and the stiffening of the arteries. So we can remedy that by choosing the right fats like extra virgin olive oil, avocados, raw seeds and nuts. When we roast things too high of heat, we're creating those advanced glycated end products again. So eating more of a plant-based diet and limit cooking methods such as grilling. Doesn't say you can't grill. I'm just saying don't do it all the time. And most of us don't. But think about when they put a burger on the grill at any of these fast food places. They're cooking them in high end, and they're not using meat that is grass-fed, grass-finished either. Strategy number 2, we want to minimize heavy metals and misbehaving minerals. And that means aluminum increases osteoporosis and neurodegenerative diseases. So we talk about cooking in aluminum foil. You can use it on cold food to wrap it and put it in the refrigerator, but you don't want to cook on it because that aluminum leaches into your food. So we use parchment paper, we use Silpat mats, and I'll give those, the Silpat mat, I'll put a little link on what they look like, where you can get them. All the stuff you can get from Amazon, as you know. Mercury, it damages your nerve coverings, and that impacts your cognition. And we're talking about your large fish, like your swordfish and things like that. We're talking about dental fillings. Back in the day, we'd used, amalgam fillings, and they have mercury in them. So a few years ago, I got mine out, and there's a process to do that, and mine I'll replace with a Cerac, which is like a ceramic, almost porcelain, which is the same thermal dynamic of the tooth. And most of us now are having to replace our fillings because the thermal dynamics of the metal in our mouth is not the same as the tooth, and now we're getting cracking of the teeth, and we have decay starting underneath those old fillings. So we're pulling them out and replacing them with porcelain, which is more natural to our teeth. And the other one is copper. Copper is very inflammatory. It destroys brain cells and immune system. And there's 2 types of copper. There's a monovalent, which is in food, and there's a divalent, which is like in your water. So you can test your water. for that. And we can look at, so we can look at testing our water for copper, and that's another way. And when you look at vitamins that are over the counter, those vitamins are, well, most of them are like you buy them over the counter, your grocery store, or your pharmacy box stores. They're they're chemicals. So like Standard Process does a really good job because like their trace mineral B12 does have copper in it, but it's food based, and food based is okay. And strategy number 3 is to reduce exposure to smart radiation. I think in January when I do the 21-day program, I'll go into a little more detail of this, but we want to reduce our exposure to smart radiation. Cell phones, smart devices, Wi-Fi devices, they all emit EMFs, which are electromagnetic forces. And that's a form of radiation. It's linked to fatigue, migraines, cognition. It raises the levels of stress hormone called cortisol in our body, which comes from your adrenals, and that affects your sleep and increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. So we don't want to sleep with the TV in the room. We don't want to sleep with the cell phone by your head. You want to turn off your Wi-Fi modem at night or put it way across the other side of the house. Use your speakerphone, and don't put your cell phone in your pocket or your, I see women put it, right up here up in their bra to carry their phone around. So there's a lot of instances now of breast cancer and other kind of cancer. When I cycle, we put our phones into a specific case that protects our phone from emitting the EMFs to our body. Because when we ride on our cycling, we have a GPS so people can find us if there's a problem, and it has our maps in there. So we put it on our back, either on our spine or our kidneys. So I use a pouch, and I'll put that information in the email as well. So after we're finished this 10-day program, so we got some rules for low carb eating. So meat, fish, eggs, vegetables grown above and below the ground, especially above the ground because they're going to be lower in carbs. In your natural fats, you want to avoid your sugar and your starchier foods like bread, pasta, rice, beans, and potatoes. Now I know we said beans is a good longevity, and I'm fine, but I'm talking about beans like on Taco Bell refried beans. That's not the kind of beans I'm talking about. So learn to eat when you're hungry, stop when you're satisfied. And it's just that simple. You don't need to count calories or weigh food, and you don't need low fat products. We want the good fat, and we want that keeps you satiated. So it keeps you from being hungry. And that's what the good food looks like. I mean, to me, that could, feed us for a week. And we do cheese, we just are careful with our cheese. So here's what we want to look at eating. You want to eat foods with fewer carbs. Vegetables that grow above the ground are usually 1 to 5 carbs per serving, and they're large servings. And we want to avoid these things. So you can see how many carbs are. And look at the M&Ms down in the corner there. That's 70 grams of carbohydrates. So that's almost your whole carbohydrate for the day. So I'm not saying you can't have them, but that's just about all the carbohydrates you're going to have. And it's not really nutrition rich and fiber dense, so it doesn't fall into my rules. What can you drink? Water, coffee, tea, little red wine. When we get past that, we start, increasing in our carbohydrates. So here's what 20 grams of carbs looks like in 2 different ways. Half the bagel or whole plate of that beautiful fiber-rich and nutrition-dense food. And so look at the white stuff. We hear about the white stuff, knocking the white stuff, the white flour, refined white flour, and white sugar. Here it is. This is what it looks like. That's 20 grams of carbs on each plate. So I know most people don't have half a bagel, and they don't have, half a cup of rice or half a cup of pasta. I'm not saying you can't have them. I'm just saying that you need to manage the amount that you eat. So this is what 20 grams of carbs looks like on a real nice plate. So you're going to be much more, you're going to feed yourself, and you're not going to be hungry after eating that. So dietdoctor.com, I'm a member with that because I pull stuff off to use it to teach. But look at these meals. I mean, these are all delicious. These are all low carb, and then carbohydrates up here in the corner. So you can see some are a little bit higher, but you can do it, and that's still keeping your carbs under 50 for the day, and that's pretty amazing. So if you just count your carbs, and I'd monitor your protein, because protein can raise your blood sugar as well. But I mean, that to me is all just delicious. And what we do at home is whatever we fix at night, we have the next day for lunch. So intermittent fasting. Research shows that it can extend your lifespan, and they did research on mice by limiting their food on alternate days, and then by cutting down the amount of protein they consume, because that does elevate your blood sugar. So half your body weight in grams of protein. So as we age, we don't need as much food, and this decreases the diseases of Alzheimer's, diabetes, and depression. Reduces oxidative stress and inflammation, and also helps to reduce obesity, hypertension, asthma, and RA, which are the big comorbidities for COVID now. And it increases your metabolic rate, so that encourages weight loss. And it's just look at all the benefits of intermittent fasting. And so we can do a couple different things. So when we intermittent fast, when we eat food, we increase your insulin, and that stores sugar in the liver, and it produces fat in the liver. But when we fast, we don't eat, decreases insulin and burns the stored sugar, which burns fat. So a couple types of fasting. I particularly do a 16-8 or an 18-6. I do it about 4 or 5 days a week. Try it 1 day a week. Try 16 hours, and for 12 hours even. I mean, we don't get up in the middle of the night and eat. So if you eat at 6 o'clock, your dinner at 6 o'clock, don't eat till 6 o'clock the next morning. So what I do is I don't eat for 16 hours, and then I break my fast at 10:30, and then I finish eating at 6:30. It doesn't mean I eat that whole 8 hours, but I limit it to 2 good meals, a high-fat meal to start the day with some protein, and usually do veggies at night. And I don't get hungry because we're eating the good fat. So you can do a warrior fast, 19 to 21 hours daily. And that's a little hard, but I think a 16-8 is really good, or the 18-6. So try it 1 day a week, see how you feel. Maybe do it on a day that you work, because sometimes I think that makes you feel a little, keeps your mind off things. You're gonna make it through the day. You're not gonna, if you're eating good fat, you're always gonna, maintain that. So remember the oils and the fats, the good fats. We want avocado, nuts, oil, nut oil, coconut, olive oil. You can even use some rendered animal fat. We don't particularly do that. Make sure they're expeller pressed and organic. And if you have canola oil, vegetable oil, any trans fats, hydrogenated corn, soy, margarine, remember, give them to somebody you don't like, or pour them on weeds and recycle the bottle. Just don't buy them again. Don't use them. So sleep tips, patients complain about that. Prayer, meditation, clean diet, early morning sunlight, writing in your journal. Don't work where you sleep. No electronics 2 hours before bed, and maybe some sound therapy. And we supplement with things like Mintran, which is a mineral tranquilizer, and Minchex, which helps do the same. Magnesium, as we saw earlier, helps to improve quality of sleep. We use that with Easy Mag, and we have it in a pill form now. Kava Forte is an herb which calms the system, and so does valerian. Exercise, you have to have both strength and cardio, and throw in a little flexibility in there. And as far as sweeteners, you want to avoid any of the green, blue, pink, yellow, and processed sugar. You can have honey, maple syrup, some monk fruit, stevia, and the sugar alcohols. Just be forewarned that sugar alcohols can cause some diarrhea. So I talk about supplementation, a good multi. We use Catalin, a good trace mineral with B12, and it's a whole food base, so you don't have to worry about the copper in it. A fish oil, and for anybody over 50, I recommend a cod liver oil. Gymnema, if you need to continue your blood sugar support. Boswellia complex that you use in inflammation. I prefer turmeric forte after the program. It's with cod liver oil. It's a 1-2 punch for inflammation. And if you've got that, liver belly, where you've got that big, belly in the middle, that visceral fat, Livoplex to help get that liver to start processing that. So remember, health is a journey, not a destination. So your next journey begins October 21st, and it's your choice to be healthy or not. So thank you again, and I'll send this out in an email with some of the things we talked about in the class, and keep doing it. We'll see you in October.